There's a specific kind of dread that most people never talk about. It's not fear of heights, it's not fear of crowds, it's the sound of a phone ringing and the immediate physical need to not answer it. The way the body tenses before the mind has even decided anything. The way a voicemail notification can sit there for 3 days, not because you forgot, but because opening it requires something you're not always sure you have. If you know this feeling, you probably also know the workarounds. The email sent when a call would have taken 40 seconds, the text conversation that stretches across 20 minutes to schedule something a 2-minute call would have resolved, the silent relief when it goes to voicemail, the rehearsed script you run through in your head before pressing call just in case. People who don't experience this often can't understand why someone would go to all that effort just to avoid a phone call, and that gap in understanding is exactly where the misreading begins. Because the label that gets applied most often is anxiety, phone anxiety, social anxiety, shyness dressed up in slightly more clinical language. And while that's not entirely wrong, it's not quite right either. It misses something important. It treats this like a fear response when it's actually something more specific and more interesting than that. There's more happening here than people usually explain. What's worth noticing first is what a phone call actually takes away. In person, you have facial expressions, body language, eye contact, physical presence. In writing, you have time to think, to reread, to choose words carefully, to shape meaning before it leaves you. A phone call removes both. You're left with only voice, tone, pace, silence, and you're expected to process all of it, interpret what's said, notice what isn't said, manage your own reaction, and respond out loud in real time with no pause and no revision. For many people, that's just a phone call. For others, that's an enormous amount happening at once. Here's where it gets more specific. Research into sensory processing sensitivity, a trait studied extensively by psychologist Elaine Aron, shows that a meaningful portion of the population has a nervous system that processes incoming information more deeply than average, not more anxiously, more thoroughly. These are people who notice subtleties others miss, who pick up on tone shifts, on what was left unsaid, on the emotional texture underneath ordinary conversation. In most contexts, that's a quiet advantage. On a phone call, it becomes a liability. Because when your nervous system is wired to scan for meaning, an ambiguous tone isn't neutral, it's a puzzle. And solving a puzzle while simultaneously speaking out loud, while simultaneously managing silence, is, neurologically, genuinely exhausting. Now, here's the part most people never connect. A lot of this didn't start with phones. For many people who avoid them, it started much earlier, in environments where tone of voice was information, where the way someone said something mattered as much as what they said, where you learned early and quietly to listen very carefully, because listening carefully kept things safe. That kind of attunement doesn't disappear when you grow up. It just follows you into new situations. The phone rings, and before your mind has processed anything, your body has already decided this requires energy it isn't sure it wants to spend. That's not a flaw, it's an adaptation, and adapting isn't the same as being broken. But here's what almost nobody says about this, and this is the part worth sitting with for a moment. The same people who dread phone calls are often extraordinary communicators in a different format. Not just adequate, extraordinary. The message they spend 10 minutes composing says exactly what they mean. The email that took 3 drafts lands with a precision that real-time speech rarely achieves. The care they put into words, the choosing and the weighing and the revising, produces something that most people who are comfortable on the phone simply don't think to produce. The same sensitivity that makes a phone call feel too much is the exact same quality that makes their written communication unusually good. It's not a consolation, it's a direct transfer of the same trait.
So the idea that phone call avoiders are somehow worse at communicating is almost exactly backwards. They're often better at it. They just need the right conditions for that skill to show up. And a medium that strips away time, context, and revision is not the right condition. That's not avoidance. That's self-awareness dressed up as a quirk. None of this means phone calls need to become easy. It doesn't mean the goal is to stop caring or to push through until it feels natural. Some nervous systems will always find certain formats more taxing than others. What changes is the story around it. Not something is wrong with me, but I know how my mind works, and this is one of the places where that knowledge matters. If any of this feels like it finally named something you've been carrying without language for a while, that recognition tends to go deeper than phone calls. The way certain minds process communication, expectation, silence, and connection usually forms a larger pattern, one that when you start to see it clearly, explains a lot more than just why the phone rings and you don't answer.